Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the third podcast here with Ustad Abdul Rahman Hassan. How are you, Ustad?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good, mashallah.
Who's been in the UAE, part of his research and education that he's doing there. And mashallah, he's been an instructor for a very long time. He's known online. Before we get started, I think this is actually a good place to start with the podcast. I mean, you've been involved in many kind of educational programs, teaching and learning for some years. How would you advise a beginner student of knowledge?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, lahu alhamdul hasan, wa thana'ul jameel, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna sayyidina wa nabiyyana Muhammed sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi. وَالتَّابِعِينَ لَهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ أَمَّا بَعْدُ. The path to knowledge is a very deep, and the scholars, they say it's بَحْرٌ لَا سَاحِلَ لَهُ. It's an ocean that doesn't have a shore. So you're going to spend the rest of your life learning once you take this path. You will never feel like you've learned enough. Rather, the more you learn, the more it becomes clear to you that you don't know. And every time you read the Qur'an, you remember the ayah, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. That every knowledge that you may have accumulated and gathered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more knowledgeable than you and knows more. When the scholars define ilm, they say that ilm is إِدْرَاكُ الشَّيْء عَلَى مَا هُوَ عَلَيْهِ إِدْرَاكًا جَازِمًا. It is to know something as it is with certainty. So it's to perceive something as it is with certainty. So the knowledge that really a person should give a lot of time to is ilm al-Qur'an wa sunnah. Yani learning the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, those are the two which our salvation and our prosperity is connected to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة اعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما. So this Quran guides to the best of affairs. It saves you from many destruction and many pain, and it also guides you when others feel misguided. And when people are in darknesses, if you have this Quran, you feel joy. ولذلك الإمام الشاطبي, he says in his kitab حرز الأماني ووجه التهاني في القراءات السبع, he says that وبعد فحبل الله فينا كتابه فجاهد به حبل العدا متحبلا وأخلق به إذ ليس يخلق جدة جديد مواليه على الجد مقبلا وقارئه المرضي قر مثاله كالأترج عليه مريحا وموكلا هو المرتضى أمن إذا كان أمة. لكن until he says وإن كتاب الله أوثق شافع وأغنى غناء واهبا متفضلا وخير جليس لا يمل حديثه وترداده يزداد فيه تجملا وحيث الفتى يرتاع في ظلماته من القبر يلقاه سنة متهللا. So the Quran, I say that it's the best thing a person gives time to, focuses on, reads, ponders on, and also the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Naam.
What resources, books would you recommend for that?
In what regard?
So if someone wants to get started now as a beginning student of knowledge, they want to start like reading the Qur'an, being able to read, being able to understand it, being able to kind of acquaint themselves with the Sunnah, the Hadith. What kind of program would you, I mean, like yourself, if you had someone, a student of yours, what kind of program would you give for them?
The Qur'an, in terms of learning it, divide it into two, in terms of learning its huruf, its pronunciation and articulation, and also learning in terms of its meaning. So I would encourage the person to read books like Tuhfatul Atfal in order to perfect their tajweed. And in terms of the meaning, kutub like Tafsir ibn Kathir, Tafsir al-Jalalain, these kutubs in terms of tafsir, it gives a person understanding. As for the ahadith of the Prophet, the hadiths are divided also into two. ahadith al-ahkam, like Umdatul Ahkam and Bulugh al-Maram, and also kutub which are jawami', like Riyadh al-Salihin and Lu'lu' wal-Marjan fima ittafaqa alayhi shaykhan. And these two in the hadith will definitely benefit a student of knowledge. Now,
what about yourself? Have you been doing any particular research now? I know you're in the UAE now. You're engaged in a lot of research, extracurricular research. So what kind of research have you been doing?
Right now, there's a lot of sciences I always open up when it comes to researches. I look into, I research. If you're in this side of the world, generally, you look into things related to Islamic finance and things like that. But there was a research that was ongoing for me for a while now, which is Ulum al-Qur'an. Ulum al-Qur'an, of course, is a big science. It's you're talking about tajweed, you're talking about ilm al-rasm, dabt al-Qur'an, ilm al-add al-ay, you're talking about ilm al-qira'at. So I've been looking specifically at ilm al-qira'at a bit more and try to have a good understanding regarding it now.
This is interesting because in the second podcast I've done, which is the last one, we actually had a conversation about that, and some of Western academics are actually getting involved in ulum al-Qur'an, if you like, but from an Orientalist, or what you call an outsider's perspective. And I mean, the standard discussions about ahruf and qira'at are now trickling down to Western academia. I'm not saying that Qur'an studies are so saturated as an industry, but it is something which people are starting to talk about. Are you aware of some of the kind of Western academic works that are done on this front? And have you read some of their works?
So in terms of when it comes to studying as science, the path which is tariqatul muthla, the correct way to do things, and I always encourage students of knowledge to do, is first of all learn what is for you before you think about observing what is against you. Because a lot of harm comes from that. You start gaining doubts, speculations. So equip yourself for what is a hujjah for you rather than first looking at what is against you. So alhamdulillah, a great portion of my research, I've been looking at the kalam of the ulama of al-Islam, what they've said, grounding myself with their understanding and their writings. And alhamdulillah, then I stepped forward in looking at the shubuhat, the doubts. And the word shubha, if you look at it in Arabic, it actually means to make something look like something. So it's basically making the truth the falsehood look like the truth. It's actually not true, but you're trying to make it look like it's the truth. So alhamdulillah, I've read some, whether it be Orientalists or whether it be people who claim to be Muslims, their works and what they've said. But what I really want to say, inshallah ta'ala, is the research that a true, sincere Muslim will always come back to is to know that the Qur'an is min indillahi. That this Qur'an is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the masdar, the source in which the Qur'an comes from, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Qur'an, وَإِنَّهُ لَتَنزِيلُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ نَزَلَ بِهِ الرُّوحُ الْأَمِينُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُنذِرِينَ بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ. Allah mentions that the Qur'an has been sent down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was sent down to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam through Jibreel. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says to the Prophet, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ عَلَّمَهُ شَدِيدُ الْقُوَىٰ. Jibreel is the one who taught him. So the Qur'an came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam through the Prophet through Jibreel. So the Qur'an came from Allah azza wa jalla to the Prophet through Jibreel. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِنَّكَ لَتُلَقَّى الْقُرْآنَ مِنْ لَدُنْ حَكِيمٍ عَلِيمٍ. That this Qur'an, Muhammad, it has been given to you from the wise, the most knowledgeable one. And it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the doubts that have been opened regarding the Qur'an are not new. Like even at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people try to speak about the Qur'an and say things about it. They said about the Qur'an, وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ إِنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّمَا يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ. And this Quran, Muhammad, humans are teaching you it. They said that to him. Also, they said to him, Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he read the Quran on them, وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا بَيِّنَاتٍ قَالَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا ائْتِ بِقُرْآنٍ غَيْرِ هَذَا أَوْ بَدِّلْهُ قُلْ مَا يَكُونُ لِي أَنْ أُبَدِّلَهُ مِنْ تِلْقَاءِ نَفْسِي إِنْ أَتَّبِعُ إِلَّا مَا يُوحَى إِلَيَّ إِنِّي أَخَافُ إِنْ عَصَيْتُ رَبِّي عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ قُلْ لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا تَلَوْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَمَا أَدْرَاكُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ لَبِثْتُ فِيكُمْ عُمُرًا مِنْ قَبْلِهِ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. This ayah, they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why don't you change the Quran?
Yeah.
And put, and he said to them sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the changing of the Quran is not something I can do. I can't change it for my own self. Like, this is again teaching us that the Quran is al-wahyu rabbani, and it's a revelation min indillahi azza wa jalla. ولذلك, when the Quran first came down on Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Abdullah ibn Abbas mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, that he sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he used to receive from it when Jibreel would come to him and he would listen to him, يُعَالِجُ مِنَ التَّنزِيلِ شِدَّةً, and he would find hardship from it, because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanted to memorize quickly, and so he would move his lips in order to memorize, and he was commanded لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه فإذا قرأناه فاتبع قرآنه. That if the Quran is recited on you, Muhammad, just listen. We're going to pour it into your heart. So from this we really take an understanding, which is this Quran is from Allah. Even if Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam tried to change the Quran, a letter, Allah told us that He's going to destroy him. Alayhi salatu wasalam. وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينِ ثُمَّ لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينِ. If Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he tried to say something about us, harf wahid, one letter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينِ. It will destroy Muhammad, it will harm him for trying to add or subtract from the Quran. ولذلك, it was narrated from Umar ibn al-Khattab and Zayd ibn Thabit that they said, القراءة سنة يأخذها الآخر عن الأول فقرأوا كما علمتموه. Umar ibn al-Khattab and Zayd ibn Thabit both said that the Quran is a sunnah taken, the early passes on to the one that comes after.
Because now you went from Allah to the Prophet Muhammad, and now you're going from Prophet Muhammad to the companions.
Yeah. And then look at Umar radiallahu anhu and Zayd ibn Thabit are both saying, فَقْرَأُوا, read the Quran, كَمَا عُلِّمْتُمُوهُ, the way it was taught to you. And it's showing us that the Quran is an-naqlu, it's transmission. It's what? It's transmission. It's passed on. It's not, I like this way, so I'm going to read it that way. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, his famous statement, اتَّبِعُوا وَلَا تَبْتَدِعُوا فَقَدْ كُفِيتُمْ. Follow, do not innovate in the recitation of the Quran. You've been sufficed. Also, Ali ibn Abi Talib said something very powerful. He said, إِنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَقْرَأُوا الْقُرْآنَ. Your Prophet Muhammad is commanding you to read the Quran كَمَا عُلِّمْتُمْ, the way it was taught to you. Ibn al-Jazari and Amr al-Dani, rahimahullah, Abu Amr al-Dani.
And you explain who they are for the audience? People might not know who Ibn al-Jazari is.
Wallahi, both of whom are said to be A'immatul Maydan. لا تشق لهم الغبار. They are Al-Imam Ibn al-Jazari ghaniyun an al-ta'rif. I hope someone who
no, he's not believing. There's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this that don't know who Ibn al-Jazari is.
Ibn al-Jazari is called the muhaqqiq of this field. يعني قراءات.
Which means?
يعني his kalam is considered to be a hujjah in the science.
In English, man. I know you're speaking Arab.
Man, his statements are considered to be a proof in this science. يعني.
Okay.
He's Imam al-Jazari rahimahullah ta'ala.
Yeah.
And as we call Ibn Taymiyyah Shaykh al-Islam in the sciences of Islam, Ibn al-Jazari is the Shaykh al-Islam of this science. Rahimahullah.
He was around, when was he around for the audience?
Around the 7th or 8th century, na'am.
Okay, so a long time ago.
Yeah. And Abu Amr al-Dani is the scholar in which Imam al-Shatibi rahimahullah, he basically done the nadhm of his kitab al-Taysir. So he done nadhm of 2 of his books.
What's nadhm mean for the audience?
Nadhm, he made a poetic form of his qira'at book. Imam al-Shatibi has a kitab called Hirz al-Amani wa Wajh al-Tahani fi al-Qira'at al-Sab'a, which he took from the kitab al-Taysir of Al-Imam Abu Amr al-Dani.
So what you're saying, those two individuals are heavyweight authorities in this field of preservation and recitation of the Quran.
Recitation of the Quran.
Yeah.
And Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, who also wrote a kitab called Al-Intisar, an Ash'ari. The reason why I mention this is because it's to show you that this issue has nothing to do with a particular group. It's actually it's an idea, and it's also a belief that
everyone that the Muslims have agreed on.
Yani it's all over. So this issue touches this issue that I'm mentioning, that the Quran is not preserved. It touches anybody who is a Muslim who believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment, whether you're a Hanafi or a Shafi'i or a Maliki, whether you're a Hanbali, whether you are any other group in Islam, other than the Mu'tazila.
No, Mu'tazila as well. I mean, they believe in the Quran, no?
Yeah, but this concept, there's a discussion with them on
Kalam Allah,
some issues. Even the preservation of the Quran, there's discussion with them on some issues. We shouldn't generalize it all for them. ولذلك الإمام الشاطبي رحمه الله in his حرز الأماني ووجه التهاني, he said something very powerful. He said وما لقياس في القراءة مدخل فدونك ما فيه الرضا متكفلا. He says that in the qira'at there is nothing which is ijtihad. There's no independent reasoning in qira'at. And it's all taken from the Prophet and Allah. And it's sunnah mutaba'ah. It's a sunnah.
Before you get there, Ustad Abdul Rahman Hassan, because this might get a lot of people that are listening here, I just want to make sure that they're following what you're saying bit by bit, right? So in the beginning, what you were showing was that there's the impossibility, the inconceivability that the Prophet Muhammad could say something other than that which Allah has transmitted to him based on the Quranic text. And then you showed, okay, so the companions, their understanding was that there's no way that they could recite, okay, something or transmit, let's use the word, transmit something as Qur'an, which is other than that which the Prophet transmitted to them. With me so far.
Yeah,
and so now you're on the stage where you're trying to show that the authorities, the Islamic authorities, were also of the same opinion. So you've mentioned Ibn Jazari and Abu Amr al-Dani. That's where you are, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And this concept of the Quran being preserved is something Allah promised us, that He's going to take it upon Himself to protect the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." And this is the distinct, unique thing Allah gave to Ummah Muhammad over the other nations. The other previous nations, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He tells us that Allah says subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالرَّبَّانِيُّونَ وَالْأَحْبَارُ بِمَا اسْتُحْفِظُوا مِنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَكَانُوا عَلَيْهِ شُهَدَاءَ. And the previous nations, their rabbis and their monks, it was a responsibility on them to protect their books. And they were told, take care of your books. And what did they do, the Christians and the Jews? What did they do? يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. They started to tamper around with it and change it in accordance to their own whims and desires. As for Ummah Muhammad, Allah Azza wa Jalla, what did He do? He said that I am the one who's going to take it upon myself to protect it. And Allah has subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's protected it from that time till now. Okay. Our Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, the people He came to with the Quran, they questioned the Quran and they doubted the Quran from the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. But with that said, the Prophet was still commanded to convey the message. First, Allah told him subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Muhammad, go forward, convey your message, and ignore the polytheists and the disbelievers. Ignore them. And you've got the truth with you. These people have a preconceived notion. They have a belief. If you come with anything, they're not willing to take it. That's what Allah told them. The Prophet sometimes became sad that they wouldn't take the message. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He said to him, وَإِن كَانَ كَبُرَ عَلَيْكَ إِعْرَاضُهُمْ فَإِنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ أَن تَبْتَغِيَ نَفَقًا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَوْ سُلَّمًا فِي السَّمَاءِ فَتَأْتِيَهُمْ بِآيَةٍ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِن كَانَ كَبُرَ عَلَيْكَ إِعْرَاضُهُمْ. If these people's turning away from Islam has become heavy on you, Muhammad, إِن كَانَ كَبُرَ عَلَيْكَ إِعْرَاضُهُمْ فَإِنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ أَن تَبْتَغِيَ نَفَقًا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَوْ سُلَّمًا فِي السَّمَاءِ فَتَأْتِيهُمْ بِآيَةٍ if you want Muhammad to take a ladder to go up to the sky and to bring them the guidance, which he won't do. So leave it to us. We're the ones that we're going to guide who we want, and we're going to leave the one we want misguided. What I'm trying to get from there is...
Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
So what I'm trying to get from there is that there are always going to be people who are going to question the authority of the Qur'an and whether the Qur'an is preserved. We cannot convince every single body because of the nature of some people. It's not that...
So let me play devil's advocate for a while then, since you want to... I mean, clearly now, one of the arguments that Muslims use with non-Muslims for the truth of Islam and for the truth of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if not one of the main arguments, is that we have a preserved book, whereas the Christians and Jews, their traditions have not been preserved, that the Old Testament is not preserved, that the New Testament is not preserved. So the first question is, how you've kind of gone about showing us the Qur'an, how it's that the Prophet couldn't have taken it from said something from himself, that the Sahaba couldn't have said something from their own selves. Now the question is, how would you go about explaining why there are differences in some readings? Because someone could argue, okay, that's fine, but there's a lot of variants, you know. You have some variant readings like Malik and Malik. You have these variants like Yukadibun, Yakdibun, Tathabbatu, Tabayyanu. All of these are variant readings which actually do have an impact on the meaning. So if it's meant to be one text which is unchangeable, then how comes we have these variants?
Beautiful. Now we go to an issue called the qira'at of the Qur'an, that we have the variant different types of recitation of the Qur'an. You see, these qira'at that we have today, as I said, it's the Qur'an that we have. The most prominent of those qira'at is the 7 that I mentioned, Al-Imam al-Shatibi collected in his kitab, Hirzul Amani wa Wajhu Tahani. The 7 that I mentioned. Huh?
Go ahead, before him.
When he said, Jazallahu bil khayrati anna a'immatan lana naqalu al-Qur'ana adban wa salsala faminhum budurun sab'atun qad tawassatat sama' al-ula wal adli zuhran wa kummala. These are the 7 here. And then he goes through each and every one of those 7. The scholars in Islam all unanimously agree that these 7 are taken from Nabiullah Muhammad, who took from Jibreel from Allah Azza wa Jalla. I'm going to quickly go through the name.
So before we continue, what you're saying is that all of the variant readings within the Islamic tradition, within the Qur'an, is not something which is additional to the text, but it's explained through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's interaction with Allah. And you're going to tell us about the seven ahruf.
Sahih. Yeah. So now we have a discussion of that some ask and they put forward regarding the issue of, you know, the al-ahruf al-sab'a. I'm going to try to simplify a long ongoing khilaf.
7 ahruf. How would you translate that into English?
You're the expert. What's the best translation?
Maybe modes. I don't know. 7 ahruf. It's probably best to keep it as it is. Ahruf.
Yeah, I like it. I like to leave it as it is and then explain it for people.
Yeah.
Now let me explain something. The 7 ahruf, it's a khilaf amongst the scholars what is actually meant by it. Let me actually go through the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he ﷺ speaks about the 7 ahruf. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, "Unzila al-Qur'anu ala 7 ahrufin," that the Qur'an was sent down in 7 ahruf. Kulluha shafin kafin. All of them are what? Sufficient, and all of them are enough. Yani they're sufficing and enough and curing. Good. In another riwayah, when the Prophet ﷺ, an argument happened between Hisham ibn Hakim and Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the Prophet ﷺ, he told both of them, "Inna hadha al-Qur'ana unzila ala 7 ahrufin faqra'u ma tayassara minhu." I want to mention a benefit here, that even though the 7 ahruf was mutawatir from the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, Umar didn't know one and Hisham didn't know one. which the scholars take from there, التواتر قد يبلغ قوما دون قوم. It's a قاعدة important. That something can be a mutawatir in one land and not in another land. Because this debunks.
On this story here, just to kind of, I think it's a very important story, just to kind of break it down. So what you're saying is that Umar ibn Khattab was praying and Hisham ibn Hakim was praying and they were reciting Surah Al-Furqan. And so Umar ibn Khattab in this narration, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, he was listening to Hisham ibn Hakim,
saying some things which are slightly different from what he had been taught.
صحيح.
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he wanted to seize Hisham ibn Hakim, he wanted to grab him, you know, because of he thought that he was distorting the Qur'an or something like this. After the prayer finished, he took him to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he said, you read your way of reciting Surah Al-Furqan, chapter 25 of the Qur'an. So he read it, and then he said, you read, and then he read it, right? And then the Prophet, he affirmed that both of them are correct readings. They're both true readings. They're both something which was revealed. هكذا نزلت وأنزل. Yeah, so this is the way it kind of came down, like this and like that. So what you're saying here, just so correct me if I'm wrong, is you're saying the Quran initially has a multi-formal basis. In other words, there are some words, not all words. The storyline will remain the same, the narrative will remain the same, but there are some select words which will be revealed in slightly varied meanings, and that's not despite the text, that's because of the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam making dua to Allah, and then subsequently Allah revealing certain words in varied ways. But you would say they all point in the same direction, and they're all from Allah.
Complement one another.
Is this what? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. No. So they all complement one another. And by the way, this topic of al-ahruf al-sab'a, it's not a topic I can really talk about in details in this podcast, because I'm just going to mention ala sabili tamthili lil-hasr. I'm just going to give some examples of the scholars who've written books. Al-Imam Abu Ubaid Qasim al-Sallam, who died the year 224 Hijriya. He has a kitab on the ahruf al-sab'a. Ibn Qutayba rahimahullah has a kitab on it. Abu al-Fadl al-Razi has a kitab on it. Abu Shamat al-Maqdisi has a kitab on it. Al-Imam Ibn al-Jazari has a kitab on it. Sheikh Mohammed Baqit al-Muti'i has a kitab on it. From the Mu'asirin, Dr. Abdul Aziz al-Qari, who's Amid Kulliyat al-Qur'an al-Karim in Jami' al-Islamiyya, Medina al-Munawwara, he has written a book on it. And Al-Hassan Diya al-Din al-Itr. We're talking about thousands of pages regarding this whole discussion.
So you're saying this is no secret, this is not something we're trying to hide, or that someone is... No. The ahruf has been something which is spoken about openly for thousands of years, for hundreds of years.
It's true. Yeah. It's so true. And not to mention, scholars have mentioned when they came to this hadith, if they didn't understand it properly and if they didn't know what it meant, they didn't lie and say, well, this is what it means. For example, Imam al-Jazari rahimahullah, he said, وَلَا زِلْتُ اسْتَشْكَلَ هَذَا الْحَدِيثُ وَأُفَكِّرُ فِيهِ وَأُمْعِنُ النَّظَرَ مِنْ نَيِّفٍ وَثَلَاثِينَ سَنَةً حَتَّى فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيَّ بِمَا يُمْكِنُ أَن يَكُونَ صَوَابًا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ. And he pondered over the hadith, he tried to understand it, and he brought out the definition and the meaning for it. Al-Imam Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah. Al-Imam al-Shawkani, Al-Imam Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, he mentioned 40 views in regards to what it means. What I want to say is that these views are divided into two. The views regarding al-ahruf al-sab'a are categorized into two. The first view is قِسْمٌ لَا يُعْتَدُّ بِهِ. Views that we don't give any consideration to. وُجُودُهُ كَعَدَمُ. Its presence is like its absence. You see?
Many of these are arguments from disbelievers.
Yeah. The second one, inshallah ta'ala, is يُعْتَدُّ بِهِ. We give it weight. And we say it has dalilun fil jumla. Generally, it has evidences or shubha to dalil. The dalil kind of points that direction.
Before you continue here, just to kind of once again consolidate because a lot of viewers just want summaries, because this is something that, in my experience, they've asked for. What you're saying is that yes, in regards to the ahruf, which are the different ways, we said slightly different ways in which some places of the verses will be
transmitted. the exact meaning of that, how that materializes, how that is manifest in the text, what that exactly means, the specific notion, is something that there is disagreement upon among the scholars, that we don't hide that disagreement. There is disagreement. But a chunk of that disagreement is not connected to the actual evidences, and it's just guesswork from non-specialists. So it shouldn't be seen as counted as among the 40, prominent opinions. Is that what you're saying?
It's sahih. Let me give an example of something that I tend to find with atheists sometimes when we talk about the issue of wujudu shar, the existence of evil sometimes. You see, some of them will mention the existence of evil or evil being there. And then they jump to the existence of God, from evil being there to the existence of God. Yani, if hypothetically I say there is only evil, there is no good on this earth, everything is evil, that does not in any way, shape or form conclude to the issue of whether God exists or not. The connection is far. Yani, what I say is the definition of the al-ahruf al-sab'a, and what the scholars, the 40 views, and Mullah Ali Qari is making it, adding one extra view, making it 41 views. Whichever of those views you take, however weak that view is, it doesn't in any way, shape or form have any effect on the preservation of the Qur'an.
Right. So what you're saying is those views, whatever view you have on what the harf is, it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to have an impact. It's not going to have an impact on the fact that the Qur'an is itself preserved.
Sahih. Sahih.
So this difference of opinion there's not much at stake here with this difference of opinion.
It's not much at stake.
Sahih. It's not true. There isn't. So a lot of the times people generally start to think, oh, because it's not known what it means, whichever view I take, it might affect me believing the Qur'an is preserved or not. And to be honest, I actually received the email from someone who actually did say that to me, or even asked me that question. So after explaining that to them and giving them a bit more details, which inshallah ta'ala, I want to say that I'm not trying to avoid answering this question of what the al-ahruf al-sab'a means and which view is strongest. But it requires a more detailed session, a course, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to be doing at Al-Madrasah Al-Umariyah, inshallah ta'ala, where I'm going to bring all of the 40 something views. I'm going to present each view and what their argument is and what the evidence that they used. And then inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to show why this view was critiqued, why this view was critiqued, and inshallah ta'ala then come to a conclusion which we believe to be the closest to that being right, inshallah ta'ala. But I just want to name some scholars who all said that the Qur'an's preservation is by ijma'. Yani there's no difference of opinion. If I can just quickly name those scholars. But I think we can move on from the issue of al-ahruf al-sab'a. The fact that
before we move on from the issue of the ahruf al-sab'a, let's just do a quick summary once again on this. So to summarize, and once again, if you want to add anything, just let me know, and if there's anything wrong,
please try and correct it. Is you're saying that, for example, Muhammad, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the Quran is revealed in some slightly different ways to facilitate taysir, ease for the people. That was done, and then the Quran was revealed ala ahruf in sab'an, in 7 ahruf, which the scholars disagreed the meaning of. We can't say, okay, there's one opinion in Islam and everything is. However, there is this disagreement, but that disagreement, there's nothing at stake with it, because all we're talking about is the type of difference between the variations. We don't know exactly what the type of difference is, but we do know there's some kind of variation. Like if you look at the qira'at, you'll see that there's some kind of variation. The exact categorization and specific notion of what that categorization is, or that variation is not something scholars have united upon. And therefore, whatever opinion you take from among the 40 opinions, so-called opinions, which I mean you agree that most of them are not mu'tabar, most of them are not connected to the mas'ala.
But even if you take the weakest of those 40, the worst,
the weakest one, the one that has the most implications and consequences, really it's inconsequential, because it's not going to affect the fact that the Quran is transmitted in the way you've described in the beginning of the show, is to the Sahaba in transmitted form. They were entrusted with its preservation. Allah's ultimately entrusted, but they transmitted everything the way they heard it. And so there's nothing at stake with that. And one more thing I think is very important to outline with the ahruf al-sab'a before we move on from it, is that there's a big misconception, you know, in some of the comparative religious work I do. We speak to Christians and Jews, or whatever it is, yeah, and we say, look, our book is protected and is preserved, and yours clearly isn't. And when we're then asked to show why is it that your book is not protected and ours is, there's two things we definitely put forward. Number one is the chains of transmission. So we put forward the fact, as you've mentioned, that there is people, a multiplicity of people on the top level transmitting that same Qur'an, that same message to the next generation, and it keeps going like that. But there's a chain of narration, whereas with the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's no chain of narration. Such narration doesn't exist. And the second thing we say is that a lot of, you know, apologists and Muslim scholars.
Just to add on that, just to add on that point, which is that Al-Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah in his kitab Al-Fisl fi al-Milal wal-Ahwa' wal-Nihal, he mentions that this concept of al-Isnad and chain is khas li-Ummati Muhammad. This is a unique thing that we have. Yeah, we're Ummatul Isnad. We're called Ummatul Isnad. ولذلك some of the Imam, what they used to say, لولا الإسناد لقال من شاء ما شاء. الإسناد من الدين ولولا الإسناد لقال من شاء ما شاء. That the Isnad is the religion, and without it, yani the chain. And if without it, anybody would have claimed what they wanted. Naam.
So that's the first thing. And so the second thing is this, that the variance that exists within the Quranic discourse, they exist because of the Ahruf Sabah. Sabah, they explain the variance. In fact, there was no Ahruf Sabah, and the assumption was there is a fixed text that it should be read in one way, and then there was variants that were found. That would be problematic. But in fact, what we're saying is the fact that Ahruf Sabah are that is an explanatory mechanism to show why, in fact, there's variations between A qira'ah and B qira'ah and so on. And so it all goes back to the Prophet. So whether you read it Malik Yawmuddin, the owner of the Day of Judgment, or Malik Yawmuddin, the king of the Day of Judgment, both of that goes back to Prophet Muhammad, and both that is legitimized by the Prophet as the backing of the Qur'an, the backing of Allah, the backing of the Prophet. Yeah? And so if this is a very important thing from a comparative religious perspective, the assumption with the four Gospels is that it's a fixed text, that there's variation. That's the assumption. Whereas the assumption with the Quranic discourse is that it's not a fixed text. It's a functional text. It has different multivariant text. It has different kinds of variants in each word. You know, so therefore, if the assumption was the same, then the standard could be the same of measurement. So if we find variants for the Bible, it's not the same as finding variants for the Quran, because us finding variants in the Quran is explained through the Ahruf al-Sabah, whereas in the Bible, there's no Ahruf Sabah equivalent. You see the point here? So I think it's very important that, because it's not like for like here, is what you're trying to communicate. The fact that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, he authenticated and authorized, legitimized the qira'ah of Hisham Hakim and also Amr al-Khattab, and he said both of them were revealed like that. In another hadith, he actually asked Allah to facilitate ease for the ummah by revealing certain words in certain different ways. That is in fact already telling us that the systems are different. So now, just to kind of wrap up on the Ahruf al-Sabah, the Ahruf al-Sabah, instead of being a problem for us, they're the solution. Because in fact, with the Bible, it's a fixed text and you have variants. So how can you explain it? Us, it's not a fixed text. However, having said that, even though it's not a fixed text, it all goes in one direction. So I think it's very important that we outline the fact that even those variants are like saying blue and dark blue. It's going in the same exact direction. It's not like it's narrative altering direction. Yeah. And so that's an important thing. The third thing I want to say is that on what you call text criticism perspective, like the biblical discourse, there's no harmonizing method, which is very important. Text criticism, when they're sitting with the Bible and they're saying, okay, what verse should we put in, what verse should we not put in? They don't have sanad. For us, we have sanad. So it's mawdu'a or something is da'if, it's not going to be read in the salah. For them, they don't have such thing. They don't have any harmonizing method.
It's true.
We have a rasm equivalent. So we have a consonant skeleton, which is the Uthmani rasm, and then the text
Uthmani text, and they don't have that. So it's important so far that we're saying that these are the differences between our tradition and their tradition. It's not a like for like comparison. So when they say, well, you guys got variants as well, say, well, we explain our variants for the Ahraf. Well, how do you explain your variants?
That's true.
That's important. So that, I think, closes the door on the Ahraf. Is there anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, and another thing I think that's generally detached from the discussion as well is that the nature of these people was qadiyatul hifz. These people were not just, they were memorizers. They memorized poetry by hearing it once. يعني Imrul Qais would come to the Kaaba and stand and read his mu'allaqat. كيف نبكي من ذكرى حبيب ومنزل بسقط اللواء بين. يعني he would read it from memory, and people would memorize it and they would transmit that to each other.
By the way, just to plug a book, there's this book. Sorry to cut you off. I really apologize. But there's this man called Mustafa Al-Azam. I'm not sure if you've seen some of his works. He's actually written a beautiful book on preservation, answering some of the shubuhat of some of the mustashriqin, the Orientalists. He's got this one, the Scribes of the Prophet. He's also got another one on preservation. So if anyone's in, they can go for that. They can use some of those books. They're really good. Mustafa Al-Azam, he's probably done that. Sorry.
Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم. يعني the Quran is, يعني it's something that's in the chest. So memorization from the beginning of Islam, it was something that was given a lot of consideration to. I want to bring to the people's attention, it's not just even the issue of isnad and transmission. I said, if you add the issue of memorization and the issue of number, and it's not just, and the Prophet ﷺ transmitting this information or transmitting this recitation, he's actually passing it to a large quantity of people. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And there's a large quantity of people who are transmitting. Imam al-Bukhari narrated in his Sahih من حديث ابن عباس أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج في رمضان من المدينة ومعه 10,000. يعني the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم left in Ramadan from Medina and there was only 10,000 people with him. And that's not all of his companions. He just wanted to leave Medina with his companions and 10,000 people followed him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now you can imagine these 10,000 people, they're going to pray with him Maghrib, Isha and Fajr. And I specifically mentioned 3 salahs. These 3 salahs are what? Jahriya. Allowed. And so the Prophet ﷺ was known to recite, for example, Salatul Maghrib, he would recite 60 verses or as long surahs. He would lead Maghrib very long. So they hear the Qur'an from him, alayhi salatu wasalam, and they memorize it from him.
And this is going on for 23 years.
23 years, salawatullah wasalam.
Which is that's a quarter of a century almost. We have to really consider that. 23 years is not like a day or 2 or a week or a year. That's a long time for people to continuously be exposed to the same material.
Now, what's mind-boggling that really took me is that I came across Tarikh Dimashq last couple of years back when I was reading it. Tarikh Dimashq by Ibn Asakir. He mentioned something that really took me back. I've yet to find.
But this is a hadith book. It's a hadith book that is collected by Ibn Asakir, one of the.
Yeah. So it's more a history book, more of a history book.
Yeah.
Ibn Asakir, Abul Qasim, Ali ibn Hassan ibn Asakir, he mentioned something very powerful. Very powerful. He said, and Abu Ubaidullah Muslim ibn Miksham, he said, قال لي أبو درداء رضي الله عنه. Abu Ubaid Muslim ibn Miksham, he said that Abu Darda said to him. So this Abu Ubaid is saying the companion Abu Darda commanded me to do something. You know what he told him to do? He said, "U'uddud man yaqra'u 'indana." Count the students who are present, who are listening to my Qur'an. I'm teaching them. Abu Darda is saying this. So Abu Ubaid Muslim ibn Miksham, he said, I stood up to count the students of Abu Darda who were taking the Qur'an from him. And then he said, I counted and I reached فَعَدَدْتُ 1,600 وَنَيِّفًا 1,600 and something. Let's just say 1,600. You know who was in that gathering? Ibn Amir, Imam Ahl Sham, one of the Qurra, the Sab'a we take. He was sitting in that gathering taking the Qur'an from him. So you have to understand that Ibn Amir's sanad is not ahadiyya by himself when you look at it. He's got 1,599 students that are taking the Qur'an with him.
SubhanAllah. This is a really good piece of information. And at this point, what I think we need to clarify is the difference between a qira'ah and a harf. So the qira'at al-saba or al-ashr, the 10 or 7 qira'at are different by ijma', by consensus,
to the 7 ahruf that we referred to.
Do you know why people actually do that mistake and they actually confuse the two? You know why that even that
I think it's because in the beginning when Ibn Mujahid, when he done Sabah,
exactly.
Sabah, he made it
yes,
7.
Exactly. Ibn Mujahid's action of making it into 7 was where the issue came from.
Yeah.
And if he did what Ibn Qalboon did, Ibn Qalboon made it 8. If he just made it 8 or 6, people wouldn't have confused it. But the reason
okay, so this is really important now, because I think a lot of people have this misconception. The qira'ah, why is it that this is a very important question here, because people are completely confused on this one. Why is the qira'ah different from the harf? Now, let me give you my short answer, and can you expand on it and correct it if it needs correction? The short answer is because the qari', who is the reciter, whether it's 7 or 10 or 20 or 1,000, it doesn't matter how many there are, is simply listening to the tabi'i, his teacher, and he's listening to how he's reciting the Qur'an. He might have listened to it from more than one sheikh, and he's choosing, the qari' is choosing, ikhtiyarul qari', he's choosing either I'm going to put Malik or Malik. I'm going to recite, because you can't recite in 2 different ways. You can only recite one way at one time. So he's choosing, okay, so there is a choice that is made by the qari'. The qari' is choosing to either recite Malik, which means owner, or King Malik. Ikhtiyar al-qari'. Now this choice is limited to the available options, all of which have been legitimized by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
All of which are mutawatir as well. And
all of which are mutawatir, which have a perfect sanad of a multiplicity of people, a plethora of individuals at each stage. So he's making a choice. Yes, the qari' is making a choice. I'm going to say either Malik, because you can't say Malik and Malik at the same time in the prayer. He's choosing either I'm going to say Malik, which means owner, or I'm going to say king. And that choice that he's making is limited by the available options. And in this example of Malik and Malik, of the 10 qira'as that Ibn Jazari mentions in his Nashr, 6 of them recite it as Malik, as king, and 4 of them recite it as Malik. So in that case, of 10 qurra, they had a decision to make. Either we're going to recite it as Malik, which is legit, or we're going to recite it as Malik, which is also legit. 4 of them made one decision to recite it as owner, and 6 of them made another decision to recite it as king. But both of those are complementary, contradictory, so they don't contradict each other, and they both have the prophetic backing. They all both got Prophet Muhammad and the authorized, the stamp of approval by Prophet Muhammad and they're mutawatir. This is correct. So therefore, the difference between the qari' or qira'ah and the harf is that the qari' is choosing the legitimate variant. He's choosing which variant to go with. There is a choice to be made. Now, we can't make a choice like the Qur'an made, because it's already been standardized and the formula has been laid. And there's ijma' on the qira'at. They've been learnt so many times. But in theory, I mean, if someone wanted to mix the qira'at and they pray in their own homes, I read Ibn Jazari, he said this fine. I mean, it's not. But the mas'ala al-talfiq is another mas'ala. But yeah, but the idea, because someone will say, okay, why not mix? But it's not a problem if we mix. It's not an issue for us. The point I'm making is that all of it is Qur'an, all of it is legitimate, all of it goes back to Prophet Muhammad, all of it is authentic. Yes, there was a decision that the qari' had to make, but it was limited by the available options. Therefore, the available harfi options, they were there, and the qari', ikhtiyar al-qari', he chose something which was limited and had the prophetic backing. Would you agree with that? And is there anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, it's correct. For the Qur'an, some are going to read Malik and some is a qism of ikhtiyarat. Let me mention some of the Imams who mentioned the preservation of the Qur'an to be mutawatir. Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, Al-Imam Abu Sa'id ibn Lubbin, Al-Imam Muhibbuddin al-Nuwayri, Abu al-Hasan al-Nuri al-Safaqisi, Al-Imam Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, Al-Imam Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Imam Badruddin al-Zarkashi, Tajuddin al-Subki, Waliyuddin Abu Zur'at al-Iraqi, Ibn Amir al-Haji, Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, Shihabuddin Ahmad al-Banna, Al-Imam ibn Hazm, Imam al-Haramain Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni, Abu al-Walid ibn Rushd al-Jadd, Athir al-Din ibn Hayyan, Shamsuddin al-Jazari, and Abu al-Abbas al-Wansharisi. These Imams all have said, once they looked at the Quran, they said that this is mutawatir. من باب أمانة العلمية.
Yeah.
To be fair in our transmission, Al-Imam al-Jazari needs a discussion. The qawl of Al-Imam al-Jazari, there's two maqala, the one he says in Munjid al-Muqri'in and the one he says in his Nashr. But as I inshallah ta'ala promised that in my course that I will be doing, I inshallah ta'ala will be tackling what,
yes, I think this point of, there's two questions to be asked. One question is, هل يشترط التواتر لصحة القراءة, or is in order for a qira'ah to be sahih, does it have to be mutawatir? And the other question is the qira'ah mutawatir? These questions are not the same. So for example, for qira'ah to be correct and sound, does it need to have tawatur ishtirat? That's what Ibn Jazari was discussing. Some say shuhra, yishtaratu shuhra, whatever, and some say no. But the question of, is it mutawatir? I have not seen khilaf. Like that, some people say this and some people say that. It's not enough.
He does mention in his Tayyibatul Nashr, which is a poetry of his Nashr, he says فَكُلُّ مَا وَافَقَ وَجْهَ النَّحْوِ وَكَانَ لِلرَّسْمِ احْتِمَالًا يَحْوِي وَصَحَّ إِسْنَادًا هُوَ الْقُرْآنُ فَهَذِهِ الثَّلَاثَةُ الْأَرْكَانُ وَحَيْثُمَّا يَخْتَلُّ الرُّكْنُ الْأَثْبِتِ شُذُوذَهُ لَوْ أَنَّهُ فِي السَّبْعَةِ. So here, وَصَحَّ إِسْنَادًا, when he says, for example,
yes,
وَصَحَّ إِسْنَادًا. So this mas'ala of Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah, and also Abu Shamat al-Maqdisi and their kalam, inshallah ta'ala, I really want to go in details regarding it because I have a research on that.
This is very important, just to translate what you said, because it's important. Ibn Jazari, who you've mentioned, is probably the foremost authority on this matter in the last 1,000 years.
But let me just say something. Sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I'm really sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
There's two things that Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah has. In his Nashr, Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah, Sihatul Isnad. Sihatul Isnad, that the ruwat are dabidin, the transmission.
Means that the chain has to be authentic.
Yeah, and authentic. Sihatul Isnad.
Yeah.
And the ruwat are reliable, etc., etc.
Yeah.
In his kitab, and he mentions shuhra, but in his kitab,
which means it has to be very popular.
Popular, now.
Yeah.
In his Munjid al-Muqri'in, he added another condition, which is talaqathu al-ummatu bil-qabul.
The ummah has to accept it with acceptance. So it's something which is widespread.
No. So he mentioned three things.
Yeah.
Sihatul Isnad.
Yeah.
Shuhra.
Translate, please.
Sihatul Isnad means authentically transmitted.
Yeah.
The second thing he's mentioned is shuhra, that is famous, that is popular. And the third
widespread.
one he's saying is that talaqathu al-ummatu bil-qabul, that the ummah are unanimously in agreement regarding it. Yani ijma'.
Yeah. So
that's the view. That's the view.
What you mentioned before is the triangulating method, because the triangulating method that Ibn Jazari mentioned here was it has to be in line with the Rasm al-Uthmani, with the consonantal skeletal structure of the Quranic script. It has to have that chain of narration which is authentic, and it also has to have be in line with the Arabic language. So with the Fusha Arabic language, and these three conditions must be met in order for it to be
which is maqbula,
veracity, for it to be read in the prayer and to be referred to as Qur'an. There's not, I mean, a lot of people now, because let me play devil's advocate here, because I think we'll be bouncing from each other, but I'll tell you some of the things that people have been saying. Someone says, okay, well, fine, that's no problem, but we've seen that Ibn Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas and Ubay ibn Ka'b and lots of the Sahaba, many of them, they have, this is, I'm putting the shubuhat to you, and this is the kind of thing we'll hear from missionaries and uneducated folk. They'll say, look, how could it be the case, if this is what the Qur'an is, so the Qur'an is that which corresponds with that triangulating method, then you have some of the qira'at of Ibn Abbas or of Ibn Mas'ud or this person, or Ibn Ka'b, and they differ in the consonantal structure, not just in qira'ah, ما يحتمله الرسم, what the actual consonantal structure can contain, but they even differ from the consonantal skeletal structure from that which is mentioned in the Quran. So how can you square that circle in the sense that you're saying that the Quran is mutawatir, you're saying that the Quran is veracious, you're saying it's robust, you're saying it's transmitted, and it's transmitted with all of these authorities, then how is it that you have these aberrational texts
of Ibn Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas, which clearly are differentiated from the consonantal skeletal structure of the Uthmanic script.
And let me add extra thing on there as well, just to make it even more of make the issue even more heavier on those people who say it. Like, for example, some add on to that and say, look, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the same guy that the Prophet ﷺ said, the same Sahabi that the Prophet said, ﷺ, anyone who wants to read the Qur'an, غَضًّا ضَرِيًّا كَمَا أُنزِلْ فَلْيَقْرَأْ قِرَاءَةِ ابن أم عبد. يعني قراءة ابن أم
So he was the foremost heavyweight, specialist among the Qur'an.
No, not just that. Not the fact he's just an authority, but the fact that the Prophet said anyone who wants to read the Qur'an, like the way it comes down, the purity of the Qur'an, let him read it like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So somebody would be like, you're telling me that some of his recitations being eliminated.
Absolutely.
And the Prophet is saying, I want to read like the Qira'ah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud.
Absolutely.
Let me break the answer, inshallah ta'ala, into two. Even my aim and objective is not really to go into these shubhas because they deserve an entire course. And these issues should be.
But are just two or three that are very popular.
Yeah, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, he was referring to his pronunciation, his articulation of the tajweed and the way he read it. But he wasn't referring to his ahruf, the style of the Qur'an he was reciting. It was tajweed and his makharij. That's what the Prophet was referring to when he said, if you want to read the Qur'an the way it came down. Because the Prophet only heard Abdullah ibn Mas'ud in a prayer, and he didn't hear his whole entire Qur'an, he only heard a portion of it. So he's referring to...
He was referring just to the tajweed.
Because the siyaq context restricts it because of the fact that he was in the middle of the salah and the Prophet heard him praying, and then he listened to his voice and he was amazed by it. And then he said, anyone who wants to read the Qur'an the way it came down, then let him read in the riwayah, the qira'ah, or the way of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. The second part, which is the qira'at of some of the companions, like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud when he recited the qawl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, شهرين متتاليات, he added onto it. These are qira'at which
he didn't add on to it. It was something which from the Prophet, right?
Yeah, it was from the Prophet. The Prophet recited it like that. But the Mus'haf of Uthman, it chose this. The reason why Uthman's objective was to compile the Quran was not the goal of Abu Bakr. This is where many people get confused. Abu Bakr was mujarrad al-jam', is to bring the whole Quran together. Lakin Uthman's reasoning of bringing the Quran together was the issue of the khilaf that was told to him, that the Muslims are different.
That people were preferring their readings over the other people's readings.
And that, which we're not saying that some were right or wrong, because Umar and Hisham ibn Hakim but they at least had the Prophet with them. They at least had the Prophet to tell them who's right from wrong. But Uthman was scared that this.
Prophet Muhammad, he authenticated both Umar ibn Khattab and Hisham.
And he started it. But there might come a time when there is no one who has knowledge enough to know. So Uthman chose to resolve this whole situation by bringing a Mus'haf that brings and unites everyone onto this. So every other recitation that the Sahabas had, this was the final conclusion. This is the only one that the Ummah are unanimously in agreement. The Sahabas all agreed upon it. Even finally, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud took this radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, yani, as authority, Uthman's Mus'haf. So the qira'ah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, it was taken from the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. It was a recitation that was taken from it, but it wasn't added to the
a lot of people
Mus'haf.
Say, well, hold on a minute. So they'll say, why should we follow what Uthman has ordered anyway? Could we put like the Prophet told us to?
There was an ijma'.
There was an ijma'.
When he did it, he wrote a committee, he gave it to everybody, and it became an agreement amongst everybody. That's number one. Number two, the Prophet ﷺ commanded us. He said, عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين عضوا عليها بالنواجذ وإياكم ومحدثات الأمور. So we were instructed to follow Uthman radiallahu anhu as a force.
Because the other hadith says 40 years, isn't it? That the Khilafah Rashidin will be 40 years. And if you add up all the four Khilafahs, it's actually 40 years. That, you know, Abu Bakr Siddiq was a Khalifa 2.5, and Ali ibn Abi Talib for 4 years and a half, and then, Umar Khattab for 10 years and 6 months, 4 years and a half, Ali ibn Talib 11 years, 11 months for Uthman. So all that is 40 years. So what you're saying is that the Prophet gave us instruction to follow the Khulafa Rashidin, and so Uthman's decision is religiously authoritative, and to add to that, in fact,
he had the ijma' of the ummah as well. He had the ijma' of the Sahaba, including Ibn Mas'ud, including all of these people who had varied qira'ahs. Not to say that their qira'ahs became invalid, but it's to say that this was the standard reading that then transmitted, you could say for convenience purposes. It wasn't the fact that Ibn Mas'ud's qira'ah has now become null and void. We can't, but we can say that Uthman al-Affan, his standardization is that which the Ummah has agreed upon, and we are sure that whatever that is Qur'an. We are sure. Yeah. Whereas something else, the sanad could be distorted, the chain could be distorted. It's not in compliance with the rasm. It's not in compliance, which means that it could go back to some kind of. It could be tafsir. I mean, Ibn Jazari says. I read this in his Tayyibut al-Nashr that actually Ibn Mas'ud, a lot of the stuff is very difficult to differentiate sometimes between what he's actually saying and reciting as Qur'an and min ba'd al-tafasir, and some of the tafasir. So to avoid all of that confusion, Uthman al-Affan qata' al-shak bil-yaqeen, he made sure that anything that goes into this mushaf is going to be that which is the most authoritative, the most legitimate, that everyone agrees goes back to the Prophet Muhammad. Not to say that all of the other companions were wrong to recite the way they did or to do the things they did.
That's true. And at the end of the day, what we as Muslims always have to remember is the non-Muslims, because they got exposed for their religion and their script becoming, contradicting and not being preserved, they now want to point fingers at other people and say, oh, you guys, your one is not preserved. That's the truth. And alhamdulillah, the fact that the Muslims today see in Ramadan Taraweeh being read by a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old leading Taraweeh all over the world, people reading from memory, and this is, I think, enough to show how this book has been preserved. Haqiqatan.
Living tradition. It's something which is, it's not something which is packed up in books, and it's a very cliche when you say that if you throw all the religious books in the world, how quickly we'll retrieve the Quran compared to other books. It's a very true one as well, isn't it?
It's true. It's true. It's true.
If I were just to throw in a couple of shubuhat now, not to cause any doubt on the people, but just some of the most kind of widely circulating things, misconceptions that on this mission. So we talked about, just to summarize so far, we talked about how it's impossible for the Prophet to have said something which is not from Allah, and how the companions, it's impossible for them to have said something which is not from the Prophet. And everything, all the variant readings go back to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and are legitimized by him. And we talked about the fact that everything therefore is from Allah. It goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the idea. We also said that the misconception that it's meant to be a fixed text is one which has led to a lot of confusion and wrong criticism. These are variants. We know that there are variants, but those variants explained through the Ahruf al-Sab'a. The Ahruf al-Sab'a are 7 modes, whatever it is, types of recitations, which are mentioned in specific verses, where you can recite this verse like this and recite like that. It's a concession, isir lil ummah, something to ease and facilitate for the ummah. It's a rukhsa, it's some kind of thing which helps the people, the Muslim. Now, there is a difference, we said, between the ahruf and the qira'at. We said that the ahruf are the types of differences, and the qira'at are ikhtiyar al-qari'. So it's possible that you can have 1,000, 1,000,000 qira'ah. It's not a problem, because all it is a combination of choices made from the available pool of differences, which were all legitimized from the Prophet Muhammad. And mathematically, you can have so many of those. It's not a problem. The point is that all of those qira'ahs, all of those recitations are sahih, are authentic, and we would say mutawatir, which are mass transmitted, in addition to being in line with the rasm Uthmani, the skeletal consonantal structure of the Uthmanic mushaf, which there was ijma' on the ummah on. And also the fact, so this is the narrative we're putting forward, and this can't be compared, we said, with Christianity, where there's a fixed text and variants, and there's not even a sanad, and there's not even transmission. I mean, how can someone even compare the two? I don't think even Western studies is a comparison. I don't think anyone makes that comparison, even in Western studies.
Even the 3rd century in Islam, Harun ibn Musa al-A'war, and Abu Ubaid Qasim al-Sallam, and Abu Hatim al-Sijistani, and Ahmad ibn Jubair al-Kufi, and Al-Qadi Ismail ibn Ishaq al-Maliki, Abu Ja'far ibn Jarir al-Tabari, and all of these, I'm talking about the 3rd and the 4th century scholars in Islam, they all straight away, Harun ibn Musa al-A'war, he died 200, or before 200. So he documented all the qira'at, more than 7. Abu Ubayd Qasim salam came after him, who died year 224 Hijriya. He took directly from Ali ibn Hamza al-Kisai, you see, and he compiled all the qira'at. So it wasn't just memorized, it was documented at a very early stage. Different qurra, their names, who they took from, it was documented. And if you actually go to Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, for example, Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, you know him. Imam al-Dhahabi had 1,000 teachers. Imam al-Jazari mentions that. 1,000 ulama who taught him, he took knowledge from the Qur'an and their sciences, he took from them and he learned from them. So, and he has a kitab called Tabaqatul Qurra, where he talks about the different reciters. If you go to Imam al-Jazari, how many mashayikh he has and he took from them, you will see this issue it's not 1 or 2, 3 or 4. I know a brother right now, he's got 200 teachers that he took the Qur'an from. Bi-ijazat, he's alive. So, this issue of the preservation of the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took it upon himself. He is going to protect it subhanahu wa ta'ala. These non-Muslims and these Orientalists and these Christian apologists and all of them, كَنَاطِحٍ سَخْرَةً يَوْمًا لِيُوهِنَهَا فَلَمْ يَضِرْهَا وَأَوْهَا قَرْنَهُ الْوَعِلُ. You're hitting your head against the mountain. Don't be nice to the mountain. You're just going to hurt your head. That's the truth, wallahi. This religion is going to stand. These people, you have to understand, أخي, لا شأن لهم في الأرض ولا ذكر لهم في السماء. لا شأن لهم في الأرض ولا ذكر لهم في السماء. They are not mentioned in the sama in good, and in this world they have no authority. We Muslims, I sincerely say this to the Muslims who are listening, we've become foreigners from our own religion. And when we've become foreigners and we've taken a step back, it leaves that vacuum for non-Muslims to come and start to tell you about your religion. I've told this story so many times, but when I was studying in the UK, I was studying at Birkbeck University. I was studying linguistics. I used to go to the British Library, and I sometimes used to take from their manuscripts. Yeah, some books and manuscripts. Islamic manuscripts over there I used to take from. I was taken back when I went there one time and I met a non-Muslim guy. And he asked, I came to the place and I was looking for some of the makhtutat written by Sirajuddin al-Bulqini. Sirajuddin al-Bulqini has a kitab called Mawaqi' al-Nujum, Mawaqi' al-Ulum, which is about Ulum al-Qur'an. But I was looking for some of his other works and other scholars I was looking at for their works. Ala kulli hal, when I got there, he corrected me. He said to me, it's not Sirajuddin al-Bulqini, rather it's Sirajuddin al-Bulqini. It was the first time I ever heard it. And you're not a Muslim, you're English UK dude telling you that this is how it's pronounced. And we had a back and forth discussion, and I was really taken back that, subhanallah, we've distanced ourselves from learning the religion and also the deen. So what I say is that qimatul ilm, the first thing that came down in Islam, the first kalima that came down in Islam was iqra, read. Just read. Go and read. And Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He praised us as humans, raised us as humans based on that knowledge of knowing. Adam alayhi salam was risen from all of the other creation. For what reason? And they prostrated to him. For what reason? وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. That Allah taught him subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises a person when they learn and they study. So, wallahi, I look at the abraz al-shubuhat of the non-Muslims, A'da'ul Islam. I sit down, I actually try to give them a chance. Okay, what do you have to say? And when you look at it, their shubha awha min bayt al-ankabut. La yusminu wa la yughni min ju'. When you look at it and you really do im'an nadar and you observe it, you don't find much to it. But the only thing they have is the ability to articulate it properly.
Actually, I liked your previous articulation. You said they're smashing their head against the mountain.
Yeah. So it's nothing, when you look at it, it's nothing substantial that's actually there. There's an example I came across, subhanAllah, that I was having a discussion with one of the non-Muslims about the Qur'an going against the Arabic language. The fact that it goes against the Arabic language. And he brought the ayah for me, قراءة حمز ibn Zayyat rahimahullah, where he read the ayah, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام is what we read it as. Like in Hamza, he reads it as والأرحامي, as a kasra, right? And this is a مسألة Ibn Malik in his Alfiyah, he talks about it. وعود خافض على ضمير خفض لازما قد جعل وليس عندي لازما إذ قد أتى في النثر والنظم الصحيح مثبتا. في النظم والنثر الصحيح مثبتا. مسألة known very well in grammar, which I don't want to go in. I'm going to explain that inshallah ta'ala in my course. Yani, what takes me back is that they will even study a mas'ala in grammar just to prove the Qur'an being wrong, but not really understanding in deep and have a very good understanding. You know why they don't have it? Because they don't have a, you know, when you study grammar, you don't just rip a page out of a book and say, this is the, you have to read it from beginning to the end and understand how it, because Nahw is one of those sciences where you have to have a very deep understanding from الكلام لفظ المركب المفيد بالوضع وأقسامه ثلاث اسم وفعل وحرف جاء لمعنى. From that beginning to the last mas'ala, it's all connected. It's building up on each other. So alhamdulillah, Islam, inshallah ta'ala, it's scripture, the Qur'an and the Sunnah. The Sunnah is being protected by its people. فسنة النبي وحي ثان عليه ما قد أطلق الوحيان وإنما طريقها الرواية فافتقر الراوي إلى الدراية بصحة المروي عن رسول ليعلم المردود من مقبول لا سيما عند التظاهر الفتن ولبس إفك المحدثين بالسنن فقام عند ذلك الأئمة بخدمة الدين ونصح الأمة فميزوا صحيحها من مفترى حتى صفت نقية كما ترى. Abdullah Mubarak, when they told him that there's a hadith which are mawdu', they said to Abdullah Mubarak, there's fabricated hadiths, and then he said, يَعِيشُ لَهَا الْجَهَابِدَةِ. The scholars are going to live for that. Jahabida, the big beasts like Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Ishaq ibn Rahuyan, Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'at al-Razi and Imam al-Bukhari. Yani they're going to live for it. يَعِيشُ لَهَا الْجَهَابِدَةِ. The other day I was reading the life of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, and I came across Abdullah ibn Mubarak saying, لولا خمسة, if it wasn't for 5 men, لتركت التجارة. I would have left and working and doing my tijara and my trading and my business. 5 men, for their sake, I'm working. I want to provide for these 5 men. Who are they? Sufyanain, يعني Sufyan al-Thawri and Sufyan ibn Uyayna. I worked for them. He used to pay for them. And Ibn Ulayya and Ibn Sammak. And I keep forgetting who the 5th one is. Yani, these 5, I work for them, or else I would have left my job. Why does he work for them? He doesn't want them to take no money from no government. They're free men. They sit in their house. They work for them. They get their risk. They don't worry about that, and they're able to defend the religion. Which
gives us a great incentive to do the same thing with all of these brothers in great causes that are doing all that work, and so there's a salaf for that in a sense, isn't there? Precedent.
Yeah, it's a tariqah sahiha, to be honest. But the point is that he just wanted the religion to be defended by those great scholars. And inshallah ta'ala, one thing I took from Shaykh al-Islam Taymi's statement, it really touched me. He said, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ إِظْهَارَ دِينِهِ أَقَامَ مَنْ يُعَارِضْهُ فَيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِهِ ثُمَّ يَقْضَفَ بِالْحَقِّ عَلَى الْبَاطِلِ فَيَدْمَغُهُ فَإِذَا هُوَ زَاهِقٌ. Allah. If Allah wants to, inshallah ta'ala, make his religion stand, and Allah ta'ala wants this religion to prevail, he actually sometimes does it in a way where he brings somebody who speaks against the religion, who says wrong things about the religion. And then through that, Allah makes a person stand up and refute him and debunk his arguments, and the truth becomes clear.
That's beautiful. And I think it's a beautiful place to stop this podcast. But I tell you something, for those who are really sincere and who've heard you present all of those scholarly evidences and break it down, there's nothing to hide. We've got nothing in our scholarly works that we're trying to keep hidden away. There's no great secret anywhere. And everyone's works are available. Everything is mutah. Nowadays, nothing can be hidden. And the truth is also mutah. The truth is also available. And this is something we call non-Muslims that are listening to this. 2, the truth of Islam, the haqq of Islam, which is to believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, to believe in the Qur'an, the final message to humankind, to believe that this is the unaltered speech, the divine, verbatim speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which has been preserved
by the Umayyads in a way that no book in the medieval period, or no book in antiquity, or no book in ancient history has ever been preserved. In a way, the book is continually living now. It's in our midst, it's in our hearts, it's on our tongues. It's, as you said, in our prayers, quite literally in our prayers. So it's, you know.
It was funny. I
like go back to your articulation. Trying to attack this is like smashing your head against a mountain.
It's true. You know what happened? I was reading in the ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah says, وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيهِمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَا نَكَالًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Abdul Malik ibn Qurayb, he said, I recited this ayah. When I recited the ayah, he said, I recited it as at the ending of the ayah, وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And a Bedouin man said, repeat that again. And he repeated it. And he said, Kalamu man, whose speech is this? And then he said, it's the speech of Allah. Abdul Malik ibn Qurayb is Al-Asma'i, the great Imam Lughawi. Then he said to him, whose speech is this? And he said, it's Allah. He said, Wallahi, this is not the speech of Allah. The Bedouin man said. Abdul Malik ibn Qurayb Al-Asma'i straight away understood that he did something wrong. He recited the ayah as Wallahu Azizun Hakim. Then he said, that's correct. Then Al-Asma'i said to the man, did you finish the Qur'an? Do you know the Qur'an? The Bedouin man said, no, I don't know the Qur'an. He said, how did you know that it wasn't Wallahu Ghafur Rahim? And then he said, the siyaq and the context doesn't allow that. Yani, what I mean is that if the Prophet ﷺ came with the Qur'an and it was something that didn't make sense to the Arabs of that time, they would have demolished the Prophet ﷺ. They would have insulted him. They would have ridiculed him. But they realized what he came with was mu'jiz. And after the Prophet ﷺ died, because they couldn't respond to it, the poet, he said, جاء النبيون بالآيات فانصرمت وجئتنا بحكيم غير منصرم آيات كلما طال المدى جدد يبينهن جمال العتق والقدم. The prophets before the miracles they came with, it died with them. Yani Musa's miracle died with him. The other prophets, their miracles died with them. Isa's miracle went with him. Because Isa's not dead. It went with him. But Nabiullah Muhammad is the only prophet whose miracle is still standing. It's still amongst us. We're looking at it. We're challenging people not on an absent miracle. Like, we're saying the miracle is here. Challenge it if you can. So it's going to forever, inshallah ta'ala, be preserved. Allah is going to preserve this religion.
I have one last question, I think, which going back to the variants and that you mentioned, that it reminded me of something now, before I end with you. Is a question someone may ask, okay, so you've got all these variants, you've got the 7 ahruf, which are the ways in which the multiform ways that we can explain the variants. It's not a fixed text, we understand that now. But how can we assure, this is the question, how can we assure that the variants were not the product of the Sahaba themselves? How can we assure this? Or of the Qur'an, or the Ruwat, or anybody who has dealt with the Qur'an already? How can you be sure that in fact those variants are not as a result, because the sheer number of them, they would argue, even though frankly it's not that as many as they make out to be, how can you assure that those variants are in fact not from the Sahaba, from the Qur'an, or from the Ruwat, or from the Turuq, or whoever it is that's dealing with it?
This thing, this is where the issue goes back to the concept of tawatur. Tawatur means يستحيل تواطؤهم على الكذب. The definition of tawatur means these people cannot agree on this. It's too large in number. And we're saying the Prophet ﷺ has 120,000 companions. يعني يستحيل تواطؤهم, that they all agree that this is, because there's a Bedouin who comes once to the Prophet ﷺ and then he goes. He never comes back again. When they all agreed upon it, was the Bedouin there as well? And when he comes back and he sees
to specify the question, I think what they would say is that, or actually, once again, push back here, is that they will say something like, oh, look at Ibn Mas'ud or Ibn Abbas, they have their own qira'ah. And that, how do you know that that qira'ah wasn't something which they
both agreed on?
No, they just put in themselves. It was a variant that was not from the original message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Generally speaking, you won't find a qira'ah, or I haven't come across a qira'ah where it's only going to be Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's qira'ah. It's going to be other people's qira'ah, because these are the only people are going to be mentioned. There's a difference between who's mentioned and who's stated. Because right now, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i was against the concept of saying qira'ah to fulan. He hated that. Because this problem came from people saying the Qur'an is not mutawatir, because they're saying Asim ibn Abi Najud, he's one person. This is the problem. The qira'ah's attribution to one person doesn't mean only one person read it like this.
Yes.
فَتَنَبَّهْ لِذَلِكَ.
Very good. And secondarily, so I would say here, that's number one. Number two is, when I was thinking about this interrogation, I was thinking about it quite deeply, and tell me what you think of it. You've got the Qira'at al-Ashr. Let's take that as an example. The 10 mutawatir Qira'at that everyone has agreed upon from the Ummah, practically, yeah? Except for some of the so-called ghulat of this group or that group, yeah? Those Qira'at, the lion's share, like the vast majority of meanings are exactly the same. So if you read Qira'at Hafs and Asim versus Warsh and Nafi', just to give two popular examples, yeah? All the storylines will be the same. There will be no, in translational sense, difference in translation for 98% of the content, maybe 99%, in fact. Where there is a difference in translation will be in things which are very similar, like blue and dark blue, or I don't know, things which are very, very similar. Tathabbatu, tabayyanu, or I don't know.
And Mohammed, there's a point that's very important to understand. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. The ikhtilaf here means, the ikhtilaf is two types. You're very well aware of that. Ikhtilaf al-tanawwu' and ikhtilaf al-tadad. If the ikhtilaf, the differences can be brought together, that's not the discussion here. We've never claimed that. We've claimed there's no contradiction. You guys have to prove to us that the Quran contradicts itself. If there's a ma'na here and there's a ma'na ziyada in the other qira'ah, we're saying alhamdulillah. When, inshallah ta'ala, again, inshallah, in my Madrasat al-Umariyya course, I'm going to expand on some of the fawaid that is mentioned in the qira'ah. Like for example, tajri tahtaha al-anhar and tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. There's a ziyada here. This ziyada, one of the benefits in it is that I get 20 reward by reading the qira'ah that says min tahtiha al-anhar, by the mim and the noon. And the qira'ah that doesn't have it has less, because of the famous hadith, لا أقول ألف لام ميم حرف ولكن ألف حرف ولام حرف وميم حرف. So تجري تحتها الأنهار, whoever reads it, and the one who reads it as تجري من تحتها الأنهار, the one who reads it as من تحتها الأنهار, he's got 20 extra reward than you do. It's one of the benefits that you get from the qira'at.
And a beautiful thing I thought about as well, just to add to this, as a means of demolishing this idea, in fact, yeah, is if you look at some of the constructions, some of the lexical constructions, like for example, Malik and Malik. We said that you can recite Malik and Malik in Surah Al-Fatiha like this. Malik is king. Sorry, Malik is on and Malik is king, right? But in Surah Al-Nas, it's Malik. There's no different qira'ah. If the Sahaba were playing around as they wished, then they should have made that Malik and Malik as well, right?
It's not just even that. The qira'ah of Hisham, when he recites Ibrahim and Ibrahim,
yeah,
the word Ibrahim in the Quran has come 99 times.
Yeah.
Okay. The largest times he reads as Ibrahim bil alif, and then some other he reads as Ibrahim. Why? Mas'alatu is talaqi al-mushafaha.
Yeah.
It is not the idea of I'm gonna read it as I want. Ibn Amr was told a qira'ah of, I can't remember the mithal. Ibn Amr was given qira'ah, and then he said, I'm not going to read it like that. And then they said to him, but if somebody came to you and told you, I heard it from the Prophet, he said, I will never take it from them. He said, because at-tahimul wahid, I suspect one person. But that qira'ah was actually mutawatir for some other imam. But to Ibn Amr, because it wasn't mutawatir, it never reached him in mutawatir, he rejected it. Especially when we're talking about the concept of choosing qira'at. This mas'ala, I really have prepared for it. I have a long, mashallah, written research on different scales. And bi'idhnillah al-kareem, it's gonna be.
When are you going to show us that research, inshallah?
Inshallah ta'ala.
When?
Yeah?
When is it coming out?
inshallah, this week we're going to release the video. Inshallah, this week we're going to release the video.
No, your research, you said.
The writing. I've actually, it's nearly 600 pages. So inshallah ta'ala, some of it I have left in the UK. I don't have all of it. And some I have it here that I've added onto it. So inshallah ta'ala, once it's finished and I've got it all written, every time you find something new, to be honest, every day you'll find something new that you didn't see. So I'm just trying to add on to that. سأمضي على شرطي وبالله أكتفي وما خاب ذو جد إذا هو حسبلا, Shatibi said. So I'm just going to hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He aids me with it and He allows me to be able to fully do it, inshallah ta'ala. Again, Jazakallah khairan for giving me the opportunity to, inshallah ta'ala, humbly prove the Qur'an's preservation and how it's that every Muslim around the world has to be, inshallah ta'ala, happy and content that their religion is being preserved. There's a great Imam, Abu Amr ibn al-Ala, you know, the great Imam, the Qari. He said about the previous Imams that came before him. He said, rahimahullah, he said, ما نحن في من مضى إلا كبقل في أصول نخل طوال. ما نحن في من مضى. What are we compared to those great Imams that came before us? Like a mushroom is like under a tree, you know, like a little mushroom under a tree. Yani when you look at Imam Abu Amr al-Dani, you look at Shatibi. Did you actually know Abu al-Qasim al-Shatibi, the Sahibu Hirz al-Amani wa Wajhu Thani? It was actually said, كان الطلاب يصححون النسخة البخاري من حفظه. He was blind, you know that, Abu al-Qasim al-Shatibi. He was blind. The students will come and they read Sahih al-Bukhari and he's blind, he sits there and they correct their copies from his memory. And they read on him and he says, that's copy's wrong, correct it. Are you there? So what I mean is that when you look at these Imams, the way they were, the way their life is, and you look at these Orientalists and what type of people they are, yani, it's not even fair. It's not fair in any way, shape or form to even mention Abu al-Qasim al-Shatibi in the context of you name any Orientalist.
Now all of them have to go back to his works anyway. I mean, all of them will reference him.
Sahih. And also what I say is that the qira'at is a science that stems from knowing the Arabic language. Yani qadiyatul ishmam, for example, qadiyatul ishmam of the Qur'an. Ibn Malik, when he speaks about it, and he says, waqsur awishmim, he says, waqsur awishmim, fa'a thulathin illa, aynan wa dammun ja'a kabu'a fahtumil. Like, in ilmu at-nahwu, the issue of ishmam and the way that it's read, it's not something that's known in nahwu. It's taken from where? It's taken from qira'at. Like they complement one another. So these Orientalists are not masters in the Arabic language. They are not لست بنحوي يلوك لسانه ولكني سليقي أقول فأعرب. They are foreigners from the Arabic language. We Muslims have to have thiqah in our imams. Like Ibn Malik, when he wrote his Alfiyah, even though he believed his Alfiyah is the best, he said, قال محمد هو ابن مالك أحمد رب الله خير مالك مصليا على النبي المصطفى وآله المستكملين الشرفا وأستعين الله في ألفية مقاصد النحو بها محوية تقرب الأقصى بلفظ موجز وتبسط البذل بوعد منجز وتقتضي رضا بغير سخط فائقة ألفية من معطي وهو بسبق حائز تفضيلا مستوجب ثنائي الجميلة. My kitab is better than the Alfiyah of Ibn Mu'ti. He's saying that. But Ibn Mu'ti is better than me because he came before me. I'm taken from him. I honor him because of he's a salaf to me and I'm his khalaf.
He's standing on his shoulders.
The love he has for his scholars that وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ. Shatibi in his Hirz al-Amani, جَزَى اللَّهُ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ عَنَّا أَئِمَّةً لَنَا نَقَلُوا الْقُرْآنَ عَذْبًا وَسَلْسَلًا. May Allah reward the great scholars who transmitted this Qur'an for us. So it's not a time where we doubt our imams and we question them and we put them down over who? A non-Muslim, an Orientalist who doesn't know much about the religion. And even if we gave him the chance to hear him out, doesn't have much.
Which we have. I mean, to be fair, I've read a lot of their works. A lot of them are very, I mean, not all of them are the same, to be honest. I mean, some of them are, some of them are very, very competent. Very, some of them like affirm the recension, correct themselves. I mean, mentioning names now, Nikolai Sinai, he's done a great job in dispelling the myths of Paul Casanova, who came before him. He said that the Qur'an came in the 8th century. And he said, no, this is not correct. And the Uthmanic recension, 7th century is actually, or the Islamic narrative is correct. And he corrected the other Orientalists because of Sana'a manuscript and the palimpsest and all of these things, and 95 radio cover accuracy and all that stuff. So to be fair, it's kind of like, okay, a lot of Orientalists, 100 years ago you said X, and now you're saying Y. You've come to the Islamic narrative after 100 years of toil. We've only been saying this for 1,400 years. And the thing is, because to be honest with you, Abdul Rahman Hassan, like, I'll be honest, Quranic studies in the West is not a massive field. There's not like thousands of people involved in it. Probably there's 40 big names.
But that's not just the, it's not just in the West. Like if you look at Imam Zarkashi in his kitab, Al-Burhan, when he spoke about, for example, tafsir, he said it's a ilmun lam yanduj wa lam yahtariq. It's like a science that hasn't been nurtured and it hasn't been reaped yet. So even if you look at the early scholars, they kind of alluded that ulum al-Qur'an is a science that hasn't been fully given like a lot. And for example,
yeah, I agree. But the only thing we would have to say is that maybe because now the thing we have to deal with in academia is the new manuscripts and radio carbon dating, things which did not exist in our Salaf. We still have to combat it within the spheres of academia, though.
And yeah, you see what I mean. So we're not trying to say that, okay, just forget these guys. We still have to refute them. We agree with them. We disagree with them.
Yeah, we have to. We have to refute them. But no, we have to refute them. And of course, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ is for everybody, anyone. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ.
Bring your evidences.
Muslim or a non-Muslim, bring your evidences forward. But for example, I was trying to study the kitab Aqidat Atrab al-Qasaid by Al-Imam Al-Shatibi rahimahullah. And I struggled to find anyone who can actually go through with me this kitab and explain to me this kitab in details. يعني it was صعب جدا. The kitab is in رسم المصاحف. يعني I struggled to find it, and it's not even a big like book. It's just small, 200 something lines of poetry. It's rare to find. Today, if you look at the scholars who are grounded in ulum al-Quran and have understanding of it,
there's not that many.
That's why the Orientalists are going that direction. They find it as a place where they could benefit.
People go to Medina or Al-Azhar, usually do fiqh
or Sharia or Hadith. These are the three main things you got to do. So what's left kind of open is ulum al-Quran. There's not that many people, real specialists, especially let's be frank, in the Western Dawah. There's not any one who can say, oh, this is the guy. We don't actually have, so this is the ulum al-Quran guy. We don't have that. We have
to say in accordance to our knowledge. We don't know everybody in the West, so we say according to our knowledge. We don't see a lot of people who are at the forefront when it comes to ulum al-Quran. Sahih.
Yeah. Or that have specialized in it, right?
Or specialized in it. Sahih.
Yeah. So and that's leaving us a little bit open. So we have to be open about that and say, no, it's true. The Orientalists, we can't wait for another 10 years before they get strong enough to be able to deal with us. Some may say
the more the knowledge reduces, the more that they're going to start saying more things. But inshallah ta'ala, as I said, Abdullah Mubarak said, سَيَعِيشُ لَهَا الْجَهَابِذَةِ. We always think khair of this ummah. They're always going to be a people who are going to stand up for the deen and it's going to revive the religion for the people. There's always going to be people, inshallah ta'ala.
That's right. Well, Jazakumullah khairan, Abdul Rahman Hassan. It's been a great having on the show. You're always welcome to come. And I think many people would have really benefited from this exposition.
Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khairan again for having me. There's a lot of things that I felt I wanted to speak about, but I left it because of it not being the most sensible place to speak about it. It's not the right place. I am going to go through it all in great details, يعني بعمق, in details, inshallah ta'ala, for any student of knowledge, whether even if they have a ulterior motive, they have, their belief and they don't want to, if you're looking for something to use, even watch it. I will present to you the arguments for us inshallah ta'ala, the YouTube, inshallah ta'ala, is the Madrasatul Umariyah YouTube channel, inshallah ta'ala. It's going to be there. It's free. You don't have to pay a penny, inshallah ta'ala.
جزاكم الله خيرا.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفرك وأتوب إليه.